Donald Trump has complained for months that the permanent class in Washington is working in secret to undermine his presidency. Virtually everyone in Washington thinks that's hilarious. It's ludicrous, they say. It's delusional. The very fact that Trump says stuff like that means he's probably mentally ill, a nut. But suddenly, they're not saying that anymore. Why? Because yesterday afternoon, the New York Times ran an anonymous op-ed that confirmed every single one of Trump's supposedly paranoid claims and many more. It turns out executive branch employees are, in fact, working secretly to stop the president's agenda. Unaccountable functionaries are actually conducting a bureaucratic coup against him. It's all real.
This is a conspirator, and he's got a cabal of other conspirators inside the White House getting paid by the taxpayer. He's unelected, he's got buddies, and they're preventing the president from executing his vision for making America great again.
So how did Washington respond to the news that Trump was right? Well, by calling for him to be removed from office without an election.
If senior administration officials think that the President of the United States is not able to do his job, then they should invoke the 25th Amendment.
In an interview with CNN last night, former Secretary of State John Kerry seemed to agree.
This is unbelievable. This is a presidency. This is a genuine constitutional crisis.
For once, John Kerry is right. It is unbelievable. It is a constitutional crisis, but not for the reasons he thinks. America is a constitutional democracy. The central principle of our system is that voters rule. Voters elect politicians to do their will. Politicians who listen to voters get to keep their jobs. Those who don't listen get fired. Elections make our system accountable. Voters get to decide who's in charge because ultimately voters themselves are in charge. That's why under our Constitution, the chief decision makers are politicians. They're elected. In the executive branch of government, all power derives from the president. He and the vice president are the only ones in the building who've been installed by voters. No one else has. So when an executive branch employee subverts the president, he is subverting the will of voters and therefore the Constitution. That used to be obvious. This isn't some crazy new legal theory. It's the basis of our democracy. And now it's crumbling. Trump won because he promised to do things that other politicians had been asked to do but failed to do. He pledged to keep the United States out of pointless wars, to protect our borders, and to renegotiate our trade deals. Voters wanted these things. They said so on Election Day. Permanent Washington did not want these things. So guess who's getting their way? Not voters. So what kind of government is that? It's not a democracy. It's something very different. It's a system where a small number of people you've never heard of and cannot fire make all the key decisions and reap most of the rewards. It's an oligarchy, and it's not even a straightforward oligarchy. If the 500 smartest, wisest, most decent people in America suddenly overthrew our government and took over, things might actually improve. Who knows? But that is not what's happening. Michael Anton is a lecturer at Hillsdale College in Michigan. He's a former national security advisor to the president, President Donald Trump, and he joins us tonight. Michael Anton, thanks very much for coming on. You've watched for the past 2 years as Trump has been called a nutcase for suggesting there's a permanent class, a deep state, and they're acting against his agenda. Now, that very group is saying, yes, we exist, yes, we're doing it, and yes, he's still a nutcase. What do you make of that?
Well, the narrative immediately shifted from the president's crazy for saying this and believing it to, well, the president has it coming. He deserves a deep state undermining him. One of the things, too, that I found notable, there are many things notable in the op-ed, but one is that this person, whoever wrote it, claims to be a political appointee. Typically, when people say deep state, they mean the permanent civil service, the people that you can't hire and fire, that are just around whoever gets elected. This is worse. This person claims to be someone who's appointed by the president, who's part of the people that come in as the result of an election to implement the will of the voters as expressed in that election, and this person has raised their hand to say, I'm subverting that. I'm deliberately undermining that. I agree with you. That's just fundamentally undemocratic and much worse than the permanent civil service doing something.
I mean, we're going to have other presidents. Presumably, the Republic will continue. So, like the next president, let's say he's a Democrat, what's that going to be like? Because now it's okay to, if you don't like his policies, to undermine them from within.
Well, the narrative will switch just as fast as it switched after the New York Times op-ed came out. The narrative will be that what they're trying to do is right and just, and it accords with what the wise and good think, so it's okay, and it's illegitimate to oppose them. And even democratic means to oppose them are illegitimate. One thing I've learned in studying the left over many years is that they're very, very able and capable of turning on a dime. Whatever the argument they need to make in the here and now, they will make without looking back.
I can't put much merit in a self-congratulatory letter that it's, behind a cloak of anonymity, because you can say anything you want if you're not putting your name behind it.
The Times says this story was published at the request of the author, which is the way the Times used to sell classified ads. Next time I want to do 1,200 words on the destructiveness of the mainstream media, I'll just call ahead and make a reservation. I joke. That only works if you're in the resistance, where you can claim it's about restoring civility, but it's really about unseating Trump.
For months, he's been talking about fake news and the conspiracy to constantly attack him. And the media, the mainstream media, denies it, denies it, denies it. And what happens? 10 days ago, 300 newspapers have a coordinated conspiracy to attack him, and they do it overtly. For a year and a half, we've been talking about the deep state, the deep state, the deep state, and CNN and everybody else says it's bogus, it doesn't exist. What happens today, Sean? We have the op-ed in the New York Times, we have the article in the Washington Post where they say, yes, we are the deep state, we are proud of it. And I'd like all your viewers to look up the word sedition in their dictionary. Go to the Merriam-Webster's and look it up. Sedition. It is the overt or covert subversion of a constitutional lawful authority. And that's what these people are doing.